to look at this applicant for who she was.
I'm going to go into the field of thanatology, and I said, great.
So first, we try to maintain them there.
Your reimagined view. In child development, it doesn't happen.
Part, though, is if that hose that runs from
Stealers who take too many children, or
Same woman who, months before, the agency said, I think we might be moving to something else. When the juvenile court was first created in 1899 in Chicago, Illinois, it was created under the doctrine of parens patriae, the state as parent, which authorized the court to intervene on behalf of children who deemed to be in need of help because of their life circumstances. That is why children come to court today, because of their life circumstances, to juvenile court, family court, dependency court, not because of anything that they've done necessarily, but because of what's happening in their family. So when I started thinking about this topic and why it's important, I tried to visualize something that would help me tell this story. And what I came up with was an uprooted tree. Because for me, this is what it's like to be removed from the family. So the uprooted tree, whether it's uprooted by a hurricane, a tornado, or even if we decide to move it ourselves, we have to be worried about the damage that we might do to the tree, particularly its roots. But in a violent removal, a tree, the roots, the branches, the trunk, all of them could suffer some damage. So it is with children. When we remove them from their families, we are impacting trauma on them. Many times, trauma on top of trauma, because if their life circumstances come to our attention, it means that they've already suffered some trauma. So while it's not our intention to do more harm, we need to be careful because we are in fact doing harm. Removal itself is harmful. So we shouldn't think that when we remove children, it is not without consequences. And the consequences, according to the research, are very dire. Children who are in foster care, their outcomes are not very great. They linger in foster care for many years sometimes. They're removed time and time again. They are disconnected from their family, their friends, and the places and people that they know, and the practices that they know. And so while we don't intend to harm them, we need to be careful and understand that we do. And in order to mitigate against this harm, I think there are several things that we need to do. First, as a judge, as a stakeholder in this system, I must recognize that in order to do my job more effectively, I need to work with every stakeholder. For me, that means holding myself and every stakeholder accountable for the work that we do. And it starts for me the very first time that someone asks me to intervene in the life of a family. In my jurisdiction, for example, I may get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from a worker saying, Judge, this is the situation. The department thinks we should take this child or these children into custody. I'm sleepy, but that doesn't give me the ability to say, without careful thought, yes, you can remove these children. So I, if understanding the law, as I do, must have the worker satisfy me that the situation is dire, that there is nothing else we can do other than remove the children. So this is the process. So I say, give me the facts, tell me the situation, and then I immediately go to, can we provide resources in the home to keep the children safe? Now, of course, everybody will probably say at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's not something that can happen. But actually, that is what is required by the law. And of course, one of the major questions is whether or not they're relatives. Even if we decide that we need to remove the children, the question becomes, is there a less intrusive thing that we can do to help the children better adjust to the situation that they're in? So can we place them with grandmother? Can we place them with an aunt? Can we place them with a neighbor? All those things are viable options that we should be considering and are what are required in making reasonable efforts. So once I'm satisfied that there is absolutely nothing that can be done to leave the children in the home and be safe, then I can authorize removal. But that's not the end of the story. So within 72 hours, they come back before me, and I again ask, what can be done to have the children safely stay at home. And in fact, that is the question that I asked throughout the proceedings, at the adjudication, at the disposition, at the permanency planning hearing. Is there anything that we can do to safely return the children home? Now, if we decide that we cannot, then we should put them in the foster care. But that's not the end of the story as well. So when we place them in foster care, then we have to be concerned about what is happening to them in foster care. There is the parents patriae, means the state is parent, and there's this idea that parents should be reasonably prudent, that we're looking for reasonably prudent foster parents, and the state ought to be reasonably prudent as well. So what that means for me is that the state, me and the state, will take the opportunity to try to find out what are the best things for the children. So when we remove them, we try to place them in with relatives if we can. If we cannot, we try to find a friend, someone that they are connected to. And if we cannot, we place them in stranger foster care. But stranger foster parents have an obligation to act reasonably as well. And so my job, I believe, is to ensure that while the children stay in foster care, I am doing everything that I can to minimize the trauma, and that everyone else is doing the same thing, minimizing trauma. So first, we try to maintain them in their neighborhood. Why? Because we want them to be connected and stay connected to their schools, to their friends, to their recreation center, to their church. So these are important things to keep in place for children as we change the place where they're sleeping at night. We know that children in foster care suffer many kinds of impacts as a result of being in foster care. Many of the children have mental health issues. I am saddened by the fact of the number of children who are on psychotropic meds, and that many times it's not just one, it's several. And so these children have suffered trauma, and they are then being medicated with these drugs that I believe are not necessarily beneficial to them. So we know that they may end up in the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system. We know that their graduation rates are not high. We know that they repeat grades in school. They have attendance issues. They get suspended and expelled from school, even as they're in foster care. And we, as the state, are supposed to be doing a better job than the parents that we remove them from. I tell people all the time that if we intervene in the lives of children, then we should commit to do better. And it's my job to try to make sure we do that. And so for every child who comes to my court, I see them every 30 days. I look them in the eye and I talk to them about their stay in foster care, why they're there, and what has to happen in order for them to go back home, because my assumption is that they want to go back home. Sometimes that's not correct, but in most instances they do. And so my job is to try to figure out how we can get them back home. And I also talk to the parents about what my expectation is of them. I tell them I have this weighing thing that I have to do, the child's best interest on one hand and their rights on the other, and that at the end of the day, if I must, I'm going to side with the child because they are the most vulnerable persons in the case. I will do everything that I can to protect the parents' rights. I will try to ensure that the agency will get the services that they need. But at the end of the day, if I don't see the parent making progress, I don't see the parent addressing the issues that brought the child or children into my attention, then I will sever their parental rights and free the children for adoption. And I say that from the very first time that the children come into my courtroom or the family comes into my courtroom, and I reiterate it every time because I think that's what is important for judges to do, and that is how we're going to impress on not only the family but all the stakeholders in the system about how important this work is. So I believe that that is my obligation to do that. When I finish the case, or before I finish the case, I'm trying to make sure that I have done everything I can, again, to make reasonable efforts. What I want to impress on people is that there is an urgency in this work, that the child's sense of time is different from that of an adult, and that we must make decisions and we must make them quickly, using the best information that we have, recognizing that sometimes we don't have all of the information. We need to try to order it and get it. But we need to make the decision and not be afraid to make the decision. The job is risky. There's no doubt about it. But I took on the obligation to make decisions in these tough cases, and that is what I am obligated to do. Gabrielle Mitchell, a Chilean writer, says, we can't wait for tomorrow for children. Their sense of time is different from ours. Their name is not tomorrow, it's today, which means that it is urgent that we timely make decisions in these cases. In 1931, Herbert Hoover, who was the 31st President of the United States, referred to children as our greatest natural resource. And I've heard that a lot of times, and I wondered where it came from, so I found where it came from. And he used that title when he was trying to get the passage of the Children's Charter. And in the Children's Charter, much to my surprise, but welcoming, because what I like to do is say to people, the ideas that we have are not novel. They have been here before. We just need to try to put legs on them and give them life. So in the Charter, there are several aims that are there, and I sort of looked at 5 of them. I'm not going to cite them verbatim, but they refer to a child's right to have a home in which there's love and understanding, to be in a community where churches, schools, everyone cares about them, in a society in which, if they happen by their life circumstance to come to our attention, that we will treat them as charges and not as outcasts, and that every child has a right to have a family who has a living and affordable income. So for tomorrow, I want all of us to remember what Scott Whitcraft said in a poem entitled 100 Years From Now. 100 years from now, it may not matter what kind of car I drove, what kind of house I lived in, how much money I have in the bank, what my clothes look like. None of that will matter. What will matter is that I was important in the life of a child.
Two separate tracks, two separate worlds.
Native Americans in the United States actually live on
Multidisciplinary representation, hearing, I kind of snapped.
Engagement tactics, calling people.